Either talk about relevant things like the Fantastic Four finally coming to the MCU, or talk about a one-off Silver Age comic about Lois Lane becoming a witch. Well, if you've been here for a while, you already know which one sounds like a video I would make. Now, this story comes from Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane, issue 1 from 1958. Here's a little background about this comic to kind of set up the premise. In the early years of Superman comics, Lois Lane was a very strong character, a go-getting reporter who, while like Superman, she didn't completely rely on that relationship, or even on him to save her. They definitely had a strong bond, but Lois was very much her own character, away from Superman as he was from her. In Frederick Wortham's Seduction of the Innocent from 1954, he would make claims of multiple things in comics, criticizing them by saying they were corrupting the young readers. From making comments about Batman and Robin's father-son relationship as being either homosexual or unmasculine of Batman, because, you know, real masculine men don't care about their sons' well-being. Masculine men ignore their sons, let their trauma build up, make them think they don't care about them. That's what masculine men do. And he would make claims that apparently female characters such as Wonder Woman and Lois Lane were terrifying concepts to young men. Strong women are apparently threatening to men. He sounds like he'd be right at home on Twitter. My fellow men, are you terrified and threatened by strong women? If so, what is wrong with you? This would end up spawning the Comics Code, which would put a ban on non-marriage lust, female characters being above male characters, and a lot of other things. A lot of other things. But it would heavily affect Lois as a character to becoming now a lot more lovesick for Superman. Despite all this happening, Superman comics would start to rise in popularity thanks to the Adventures of Superman live-action series, starring George Reeves, which highlighted some of its supporting characters, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Perry White. DC took this and thought maybe the supporting characters could spin off into their own comics, starting off with Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. And soon Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane would follow, starring a now lovesick for Superman Lois Lane. No Superman's boss Perry White comic though. Poor Perry. Superman would also be a victim of the Silver Age with his super dickery behavior, which there are shades of in this story. He's not super dick yet, but he's a bit of a dick. He's a little dick. He's a very little dick. Because there are shades of his manipulation tactics that he would use a lot in the Silver Age, but here they actually have good intentions, even if they are a little questionable intentions. As in, you'll see. But he's just a little dick here. So, what is the cover story of the first issue of this series? Note, I say cover story because there are actually 3 stories in this issue. The teaser for this story shows Lois saying the magic word said a lot in this story. Hicks hoax hex, while looking a lot more witch-like than she'd done on the cover, using magic to type on her typewriter. And in the background, Superman looks very concerned. We start our story with Lois Lane writing her own story in a museum section that's on old-day superstitions and witches, which Lois doesn't believe in, thinking of it as silly old nonsense. Don't let Zatanna hear you saying that, she'll erase your mind and gloat about it. Lois's compact slips from her hands and breaks on the ground, with her joking that it'll give her 7 years of bad luck. But the museum curator tells her that despite what she might think, there might be some truths or superstitions, which Lois thinks is completely crazy talk, thinking that magic's fake. Even though she's met and nearly married once a magical imp, Mr.Mxyzptlk. Lois's next story is with a Professor Jason. Is it normal to call them by their first name using Professor before it? Wouldn't it be more like Professor Smith? Jason's trying to make a youth serum which Lois is also reporting on, which she thinks is very plausible and wishes him best of luck on his work. Lois that night while writing realizes her hands are becoming old and wrinkled, before checking the mirror where she says in her words that she looks like a hag in quotes. Lois then goes to check this pamphlet she got from the museum. This is a woman that breaks a mirror in front of the portrait of Mad Molly, the witch of the museum, will too become a witch. Confused and scared, Lois leaves to get fresh air where, while on a walk, Superman pops up, where he seems to not recognize her, thinking that she's an old woman and telling her to be careful because there was escaped criminals in the neighborhood. I like how he doesn't try to evacuate the area, or even try to fly her out of there, just tells her you might get shot. Anyways, see ya. Anyways, she's then nearly shot by the criminals in question, but by only chance, she lets out Hicks hoax hex, which seems to curve the bullet out of the way from hitting her. Superman then shows up as she runs away. The next morning, Lois realizes she looks normal again, hoping it was a dream. But when it comes sundown, she becomes a witch again, even being able to fly around on a broomstick. Lois uses her powers to sneak onto the set of an upcoming space movie so she can report on it and give all the spoilers. Was Lois the one who leaked Andrew Garfield a No Way Home? Lois does feel bad about using her powers on getting the story, but when she hears Clark is being put on some special assignment about some spy shit, she can't help but feel jealous about not having been put on it by Perry. So Lois that night uses her witch self to go once again to get a story, this time actually outscooping Clark, before he even had a chance to investigate. Well, kinda, you'll see. But then she gets another idea. She wants to know if Clark Kent is really Superman, something that she has suspected for years, but never clear confirmation. But as a witch, she can create kryptonite and tries to expose him, only for us to see as Lois and the witch start to fight for control as Lois tries to refuse to go with this, thinking this as a betrayal of trust. But betrayal of trust, that's not an issue for him. She does manage to convince herself against going through with it, only for the next day Superman finds Lois crying at her desk, where she tells him that she's a witch. But he reveals that she actually was infected by the youth serum from earlier on, that did the opposite of what it was meant to, giving her the appearance of an old woman at night, along with Superman revealing that it was him the entire time, using his powers to make her think that she was actually a witch, and that was fake kryptonite that he had dropped in her hand. Yeah, betrayal of trust, not a problem for Superman. Professor Jason told Superman not to tell her the truth because the shock would be too much for her. Really? So you think that her being a witch was a better alternative for her to think than for her to think that she was turning old because of a chemical reaction and that there could be a cure? No, make her think that she's actually a witch and that she has superpowers. Superman even used invisible wires to carry Lois on a broomstick. How did she not realize? Also, a small detail I feel like is being glossed over is the fact that the serum didn't change Lois's personality. All of the crap she did as a witch, or as a witch in quotes, that was her. It was not a personality change, it was only a physical change. She actually broke into a movie set. That is what Lois would do if she had powers. Superman tells her that the old age serum wore off. The story ends with Lois happy and making a joke about saying that she doesn't want to look bewitching. Yes, it was that easy. My dumbass actually thought this was a Bewitched joke at first, but that show started in 1964, 6 years after this issue. I know bewitching is a term in itself, I just assumed it was some sort of Bewitched joke, but I was wrong. My grandma was a huge fan of that show, and I also watched it a lot as a kid on DVD. Not as it was airing, obviously, because I was born in 2005, so that was way before my time. This story is very weird. There seems to be this want to go zany, but at the same time doesn't want to go too far, so instead of magic, making it science, and that Superman was actually behind all of it. Which doesn't exactly make him look the best. And his reasoning being that she would be too shocked to find out she's an old woman doesn't really make sense considering the fact she thinks she's a witch. It means that she also is cured doesn't really make much sense. The idea just wore off. If it was going to wear off, why not just tell her that in advance, instead of her thinking that she was forever a witch at night? I don't know, the logic doesn't track. However, at the same time, it is still kind of fun. Maybe not as much as other stories in this series, or even in this issue, but it's a decent Silver Age outing. Not the best, or even the zaniest, or even the funniest, but decent, middle of the road. And that's it. Like always, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!